It's time to get heavily into the defensive line, and there are some heavy players here. We're talking defensive tackles and edge rushers. Matt Williamson's 2025 NFL draft rankings on the defensive line. Next.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We're talking NFL draft today, breaking down defensive linemen in the class. We're going to rank edge rushers, and we're going to rank the defensive tackles as well. Really deep class, and it's a big undertaking. Hopefully we can get to all the ones we want to talk about. We're going to talk about the guys at the top, of course, and then get into some sleepers and some just missed players from Matt Williamson's NFL draft rankings. And we're probably gonna have to dip back into these classes individually with just the edge rushers, just the defensive tackles as we get a little closer to the draft, because still have some pro days to complete as well, Matt, as it pertains to these prospects. I do want to thank everybody for making this your first listen, and make sure you're following Matt and I on Twitter at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. That's where you can get those questions in for this week's mailbag. And of course, subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Let's start at the edge, and everyone's favorite draft prospect is Abdul Carter out of Penn State. Any reason for you to think maybe he does not belong at the top?
No, he's number one. And you kind of mentioned it. Both these classes all across the defensive front are really the strength of this draft class, along with running back. Really, really deep. I'm sure the Eagles' recent success will even have more guys flying off the board even quicker if possible, but expect a lot of D linemen of all shapes and sizes to go in the top 2-3 rounds. Yeah, Carter's great. I don't think he's a Myles Garrett level prospect, because I do think he can get rerouted, and I don't think he's super strong, and he's a little smaller and he could end up on the ground. But boy, he is a force. There's no question about that. I mean, he plays really, really hard. I think he's a tremendous prospect and easily number one.
Yeah, and there's a big reason why he's the number one defensive end edge rusher in this class. I do have some reservations, but the high-end talent is obvious. You know, he's an off-ball linebacker, so he's not the biggest, but he can fly off the edge. He can flatten his burst to close to the quarterback, use his hands well. He looks more seasoned than a guy who's been a full-time defensive end for only 1 year. And they know how to coach him up over there at Penn State too, with their edge defenders. And he's not Myles Garrett, but you're probably hoping he's Von Miller. Like, that's how people are treating that prospect. You know, that a little bit lighter, but can just flatten and run with their chest 6 inches off the ground and go get the quarterback and go be a nightmare off the edge. He's got a little bit of speed to power, and some counters with spins and other moves inside, not just running around all day, because that's where it starts. You can't win in the NFL just running around the offensive tackle because you're more athletic. It's just something that can't happen. So you have to win dirty. You have to have other moves. You have to have some speed to power. And the power element is where I start to have a question. And so that's why, as far as prospects go, if I was ranking today, the hay's in the barn with Travis Hunter. He'd be my number one player, because I still need more. I still need to complete Abdul Carter, because, first of all, he had that, what was it, like a foot injury? I don't think it's anything serious for him at the combine.
Yeah, no one seems concerned.
But because of that, somehow he just kind of skated through and
didn't no numbers on him, or right.
How does that happen?
Right.
Was like some shenanigans going on. And it also tells me, like, we need to wait and see exactly how big he is. Like, is he 6'3", 250 with 34-inch arms? Okay, cool. He can be number one over Travis Hunter. I'm okay with that. And runs well, and he still has to check boxes. Is he 6'2", 240, 32-inch arms like Jalon Walker? Right. And then it's like, well, hold on a second. Is he going to be a fit for every team? Is he really going to be able to hold up on the edge? Does he have that elite level of physical prototype tools that you can project for him to be that guy at the top of the draft. So still incomplete with Abdul Carter. And I'm side-eyeing over there. I'm like, hey, Abdul Carter, what'd you do? How'd you sneak out of getting weighed in? Is there a reason he didn't weigh in at the combine? So that Penn State Pro Day, which I believe is March 28th, so coming up here pretty soon, we'll get some more answers. But he's still got to complete the process. And I want to make sure he's that elite level of like, I need some long arms. I need him to be 6'3", 250, or at least be close enough to get to a spot where I think he can hold up as a run defender on the edge, as well as be just a stand-up speed rusher in the NFL.
Yeah, and for those reasons, I think maybe 50% of the drafts, he's the first edge guy off the board. Like, I don't take him ahead of Nick Bosa coming out of Ohio State, let alone Garrett. You know, I mean, and we're comparing him against the best. I mean, it's a beauty contest here. I mean, these are all really good
number one player in the draft, and so you want to feel good about that if you're going to take him, especially over a franchise quarterback. And those are the decisions happening with those teams at the top of the draft right now. I love him though, but again,
we're comparing is he elite?
And it kind of goes along with the theme of these are really deep classes of defensive ends, stand-up edge rushers, defensive tackles, but there's not a lot of complete.
No, the whole draft is this way.
It's like choose your favorite flavor here, because that's what
you mentioned. Walker, he's next for me. Yeah,
I think that's why it's going to be so fun watching how this thing. Like, if you're the Steelers and you employ that old school stand-up rusher, you love Jalon Walker, right?
Right.
If you're a team that plays more 4-3, you're going to be like, well, Jalon Walker doesn't fit for us. He's a tweener, and I don't know if he's there as an off-ball linebacker. So how do we even use that guy? So this is going to be a fascinating class, how each team, and I think every board is going to view these guys completely different. So buckle up when it comes to defensive linemen. There are a lot of good ones. There's a lot of deep, it's a deep class, but a lot of one-dimensional prospects too.
100%. Like, they will all view these guys differently. A lot of them are very talented, but I definitely think, and I don't know who they're going to be. I don't have a crystal ball, but there's going to be some busts too. I mean, there's going to be some guys that just don't translate, and
right.
Maybe Walker's one of them. You know, he just can't. He's not physical enough to play the line of scrimmage and deal with the run stuff and run through tackles' bodies, and he's not a linebacker. I mean, it's possible.
And I actually think he plays a more physical brand than Abdul Carter does.
In some ways, yeah.
He doesn't really fit that length profile coming off the edge, and so very much a tweenery situation. And he didn't have the opportunity to prove he's an edge rusher for a full season either. So you didn't even get the tape of what I think he should be in the NFL. So I have no idea what to do with Jalon Walker at all. But he's your number two.
He's my number two. I mean, I could see the Panthers taking him high, or the Saints, or somebody like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and part of it's because Jamar Stewart's my number three, and he doesn't make any plays.
I am out on Jamar. Jamar Stewart's not in my top five.
I think I'd have him lower if I were to redo these. By the way, so you can excuse away the lack of production, and you can say, "Oh, yeah, Danielle Hunter did it." You know, we talked about this last week. Danielle Hunter did it, so you know it's not impossible. But it's like, okay, I'll take Jamar Stewart in the third round. That's right. I'm not taking him in the top 10, top 15, top 20. No way. You start talking about him in the second round, and it's like, okay, well, let's bet on this because he does have crazy burst and athleticism, 6'5", 260, and runs a 4.59. And he does get this is what's frustrating about Jamar Stewart. He gets an instant jump on offensive tackles on almost every snap because of that burst and athleticism. And he has nothing. Match with the length, right?
Nothing else at the top of his rush. And I see his feet slip out. I think it's biomechanics. I don't think it's a technique thing. He cannot turn the corner, and I'm not drafting him that high. I'm just not.
I have him third, and I probably would put him maybe outside the top five if I were to redo it again for all those reasons. And the other thing is, some of these guys don't have production, but you feel their presence snap after snap. That's not him. He's not like just making play, redirecting ball carriers and taking on double teams. Like, there's times you don't even notice he's out there.
There is a little bit of a floor with as a run defender because he's up to the task as a run defender.
Yeah.
And I think he can be okay, but I think if you draft him to be a dynamic pass rusher, which is what you're doing if you're drafting it, like that's why it's like, okay, well, Abdul Carter's not that good against the run. Well, I don't care.
I don't care.
You need Abdul Carter every single day over Jamar Stewart because he can get after the quarterback, and that's what you really, really, really need from those edge rushers anyway. And so that's the most. Like, I can find a one-dimensional run stuffing defensive end later in the draft.
Anywhere, right?
On day 3. So that's where I'm at with Jamar Stewart. I don't like him at all, but that's kind of I mean, I don't know. These guys all have the same grade. Who knows what order these guys are going to go in? So it's so hard to rank them. Who's 4 for you then on the edge?
I went Mike Green. I mean, really, really good production. I wish he were a little bigger too, but he's also more of the 3-4 stand-up outside linebacker to me. But he has some off-the-field stuff that everyone knows about that he has not shied away from. I'm not including that in the ranking. I would probably have him over Stewart, though, if I were to redo these.
If we're just talking
football
pass rushers, I'd probably have him number 2. I really like the way he plays. He brings speed to power, even though he's not the biggest. He is 6'3", 250, which is big enough. I wish his arms were longer. I think he's only got the 32-inch arms.
Not great.
Yeah. Hasn't really been a problem in college, but he's again not a perfect prospect, but he's a finisher. I like the way he plays, the motor. He's a good pass rusher, has moves. He's got that ability, unlike Shamar Stewart, where it's like water downhill. He's like mid-rush, I'm going this way, I'm going this way. Okay, I'm swiping here, I'm ripping here, and he finds his way home to the quarterback. And I just think it's something that it translates from college to the NFL. Yeah. And I wouldn't expect Shamar Stewart to be able to figure out at the next level, or I wouldn't draft him expecting for him to figure it out. Mike Green has already figured that out. That's why I like him. Off-field stuff, I have no idea. He might not go in the first round. So I just don't know how that's going to impact it.
That's not really for us to even comment on. Who knows? But,
more on the defensive end class. We're going to get beyond the top. Where are we at? Number 4. We're going to go 5 and beyond here with some rankings, some sleepers, some of our favorite players on the edge, and then talk defensive tackles, where the class is, again, very similar. A lot of one-dimensional players. Pick your poison. Which size and shape do you like in a really deep defensive line class? Next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. It is March Madness time, and there's so many ways to play at FanDuel, and they're giving you a chance to get in on all of the action like never before, because right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters, Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something excited to get in on, and the FanDuel app is super simple to use. So whether it's the FanDuel app or you're going to FanDuel.com, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around. So all you got to do is visit FanDuel.com or download the app to get in on all of the college hoops action all tournament long. You want to bet on Major League Baseball, which is now getting going, which I'm super excited about, NFL draft props. You can find all of it at FanDuel.com. Who is defensive end number 5 for you?
Mykel Williams. I mean, I understand why there's all this hype, and he has some Trevon Walker-like traits, and he played through injuries, and he's really pretty, but I would like a little more production there and more twitch as well. I mean, again, he has some concerns for me, a little bit raw overall too.
I've got a bone to pick with Georgia and their defensive scheme, because all these guys end up having to play a different position in the NFL. And they've got crazy athletes. It's like, can you just show us what we want to see, what he's going to look like in our scheme? And you don't get a chance to see it. Jalen Walker is going to change positions, and Nolan Smith and Trayvon Walker and Mykel Williams. And Mykel Williams actually looks bigger, plays bigger than Shamar Stewart, but weighed in lighter than Shamar Stewart at the combine. They're both 6'5". I thought he was going to be closer to 270. He was only 260 pounds. Mykel Williams didn't run, then ran in his pro day and not particularly fast, 4'8", and he's long and big, and he's a pretty good run defender. And but he's still very raw. He's like Bambi out there, doesn't know how to use that length in his hands quite well enough. And he gets home at least a lot more often than Shamar Stewart. So I would have him a slot ahead of Shamar Stewart. But that guy that was being billed as like a top 10 player, teams love length, and he's got 34.5-inch, almost 35-inch arms, I think. But I don't know. He's not Aldon Smith or anything like that.
No, right.
I don't quite see it there with him. I like him as a late first round guy, but I was hoping for more, and I was hoping for, if you're going, and that's the problem, because you need to project, right? And so for Jalen Walker, I need to see edge length, and then I can be like, I can see it, I can project it. With Mykel Williams, he's got the length and some size, but I wanted to see the juice and the explosion and the workout numbers to be able to project, every down end, he's going to be even more dynamic as a pass rusher in the NFL as he gets more technique. And it's hard for me to do that. So don't love Mykel Williams. And I think you got in the right spot.
Like, I could see Green being a number one pass rusher that leads his team in sacks 5 years in a row. I think Williams is a number 2. That's a nice piece, you know?
Yeah, like Mykel Williams is that guy that the Buffalo Bills draft at the end of the first round every year.
Yeah. Epinesa and all those guys.
Yeah, solid, big, can stop the run.
Right.
Kind of okay pass rush.
If everything hits, he might be Rousseau, but probably isn't, you know?
Outside of the top 5, where are you going? Did you have any honorable mentions?
There's a million. I mean, to leave Ezeruku and Pierce and Scourton off is pretty crazy. I mean, they all could end up in the first round. I mean, even guys like Landon Jackson from Arkansas, I kind of like Swinson from LSU, Prince Yu from Mississippi. I mean, there's a lot of dudes here deep into this draft. Kennard and Jalon, and I mean, guys are going to go even later. I'm just scrolling through a list here, so I don't want to miss any, but there are a lot that will be contributors next year.
I really like James Pierce. I'd probably have him in my top 5. He is just so fast coming off the edge, but again, like he doesn't quite have when I say hips, not the swivel hips, but he doesn't have the width of hips. Like he's built like a center. He's built like a wide receiver, and it doesn't help that he's wearing number 27 at Tennessee too. He's looking smaller, but it's like he's not going to get bigger. So he's a 240 pound 6'5". That's very slim. So if you need a stand up rusher, he's actually surprisingly good against the run, even though he's a slim guy. He kind of misses he misses some tackles finishing. His arms aren't actually even that long for being 6'5", but he can get home, and when he goes. So I like that about him. I just feel like I know what he is more. With the other guys, you're really guessing on both sides of it. At least with him, I kind of know what I'm getting there. So I feel comfortable with James Pierce and his speed coming off the edge. Scorton, apparently at Texas A&M, they wanted their guys to get bigger, so that's why we saw Scorton and and Shamar Stewart.
Nobody produces at A&M,
right? And then who was the other name you mentioned there? Oh yeah, Prince
Ezeruku, Prince Yu,
Money Ellen. Don't love him.
Jackson.
There's character stuff with him. He's kind
of I think he's a
good pass rusher, but he's like a designated pass rusher to me. He's gonna fall a little bit, I think. And then gosh, there's so many names in there. Like
Ezeruku is really good from Boston.
Oh, I love him. Like he's basically if you don't get Abdul Carter, get Donovan Ezeruku out of Boston College. Like he's got that ability to flatten, get around the corner. I think of Harold Landry with him, right? Just a real not the biggest guy, but he knows how to get home. He knows how to rush. He's got the length profile. I love him late round 1, early round 2. If you're a team that loved Abdul Carter, can't get him early, maybe 1 round later you can get Donovan Ezeruku. Real big fan of him. He'd probably be in my top 5 as well.
He could certainly make a strong case. I mean, if you liked him better than Stewart, I would 100% understand. You know,
one guy that I think is being slept on is Jared Ivey out of Ole Miss. And by the way, Ole Miss, best team money could buy.
What are they doing? Right,
NIL money that they spend to have all these players there still fell a little bit short. But Jared Ivey's one of the few guys that's complete. He might not be dynamic as a pass rusher, speed-wise off the edge, but he's got athleticism. He's 6'5", 270, could stop the run. Yeah. He's one of the few complete guys, and I think teams value that. I think he's someone that's going to surprise people how high he goes and how good of a player he is compared to some other guys that are a little bit more one-dimensional in this class. So Jared Ivey's kind of one of my favorites right now in that second round area.
On the negative side, I don't see it with Jack Sawyer. Like, to me, if he's not Ohio State and makes big plays and there's some stereotyping his hustle and, you know, underrated athlete because he's white. I just think he's a bad athlete.
That's the problem. Yeah,
I think he's a bad athlete.
And you see it on tape. He's not a good athlete on tape, and he'll hustle. He'll hustle.
Some he takes some plays off too. You know,
he doesn't even have like a good length profile. He's big, but he's shorter arms too. So he's gonna have trouble, I think, disengaging and winning as a pass rusher in the NFL. 6'4", 260. 31 and like he's got the shortest arms I think of just about everybody here, and he's not.
If he was at Marshall, we would not be talking about him like Mike Green. You know what I mean? Not even close. Right.
And so it depends where you can get him. You want to have a guy who's a try-hard player. He's going to play in the NFL and he might have a 10-year career. I don't know, but you're not drafting him in the top 50, in my opinion, to be a dynamic player on your defensive line.
I don't see it. Yeah,
I like his teammate better. I just wish there was more finish to his pass rush because he's more athletic. 6'4", 265. JT Tuimoloau. He's got the arm length. I think he's much more athletic than his teammate in Jack Sawyer. And so
I don't think it's close.
he's in that Jared Ivey mold where I think he's a little bit more complete of a player. I think I like Ivey just a smidge more, but I bet they both go in that second round range. And I think defensive line coaches and GMs around the league, they like size and like being able to stop the run, I think, more than the draftnik community does. You know, we get so excited about that edge and that bend and these athletes. If you can't get third and long in the first place, then it doesn't matter if you got that edge rusher on third down. So I think some of these bigger, complete players like JTT and Ivy are going to go maybe slightly higher than some people expect.
I can see that. I mean, they're bullies. They push the pocket. You know, they're hard to play against. It's a long day. You know, those guys beat up on you throughout the course of the day. Rotate them in, you know. Absolutely.
I mean, there's a ton. We're going to have to just scratch the surface here on the defensive tackles next, talk about the top guys.
Yeah, they're really loaded too.
And we're going to continue to talk about this defensive line class and maybe have some cluster buster episodes here with these as we get closer to the NFL draft. But we'll finish up with defensive tackles on this episode next. All right, Matt Williamson's defensive tackle rankings. And again, you go to Steelers.com and find the write-ups of why Matt ranks these guys this way. You can find some other rankings there as well. Who's your number one defensive tackle? And if it's Mason Graham, did you have any worries about him showing up at the combine 20 pounds lighter than he was listed and then still not run?
And that's why I made him number 2. I took Kenneth Grant ahead of him, and it wasn't an easy decision. I look at Graham, though, and just think he's not that great of an athlete. He's got short arms. He's smaller. Sometimes double teams beat the crap out of him against some of the real good teams, not the Ohio State game, but some of the other, you know, I think it was Texas, a couple other games where they run at him. I think he's a really good interior pass rusher, and I do think he's super productive, but most years he's not DT1. I'll roll the dice on the dude that's almost 6'4", 330 pounds. That's just a much better athlete that has some pad level issues, but he might be Vita Vea, you know?
Kenneth Grant is fun, and he is so athletic at his size, 6'3" and 5'8", 331 pounds. The pass rush repertoire is not there, which gives me pause. I think Kenneth Grant's a first-round guy all day. Mason Graham, though, again, much like Abdul Carter, I need to check some more boxes on him. I love the tape. I love the way he plays. But you painted the picture. We just crushed Jack Sawyer for the same picture you just painted for Mason Graham. Now, I think Mason Graham's more athletic than Jack Sawyer. But if you're going to be 296 pounds, you better work out crazy at the Michigan Pro Day, right? And if not, you still better be 315 pounds, I think, because you need to be big and strong. And you know, he's a good pass rusher. He causes problems inside. He's a good run defender. But I didn't like him showing up at 296 and then still not run. So still some questions with Mason Graham. I do think he's my DT1 still because I like the tape and he is so disruptive and he's good.
I totally get it. Yeah.
But it's also the reason why he might slip and might not be that, you know, he was a slam dunk top 5 guy for a while. He might creep towards the end of the top 10 and maybe even out of the top 10, depending on how things go at his pro day.
And you hear a lot of these analysts say he's one of the safest prospects. Everyone's going to like him. Yeah, but I don't think there's any chance that he's a triple or a home run. He's a leadoff walk. You know, like he's not Quentin Williams. He's not, you know, these guys that have gone really high at this position. Just not the same beast, you know. I mean, he's not as gifted as those guys. He's not Chris Jones. I know that he was a second rounder, but I mean, the stars at that position are freaks, and he's not a freak.
Well, you know who's Chris Jones, and you know you could talk me into drafting over both the Michigan guys.
Nolan
is Walter Nolan.
Yeah.
So here's what's going on with Walter Nolan. To me, the tape says that he's a straight up dude. Like he should be a top 15 pick.
His highlight film's unbelievable,
and he's got burst. He plays hard. You know, he's got a motor.
Yeah, he plays the run.
The run, despite being a hair under 6'4", 296 pounds. He showed up the same size as Mason Graham. He's a good run defender. He's got ability as a pass rusher. He's got burst. And the fact that insiders are mocking him late round 1 or even not in round 1 at all tells me that there's character stuff. Because there's been rumors of it. But if you put on the tape, he's a top 15 guy.
Yeah, like I kind of want him at 21 for the Steelers, you know.
Right.
Cam Hayward, whatever the character stuff is, beat it out of him and turn him into a star. You know, exactly. I think his tape. I consider putting him 1.
Yeah, I mean, he's right there for me. He's he's not quite as big as Chris Jones and Jalen Carter, but that's sort of the archetype of player he is.
Yeah. I mean, he is a disruptive, freaky guy that was the top recruit in the country, and you can see why. He still has some recognition skills to come around, but
Is he number 3 for you?
He is. And he was almost 1. Yeah.
Who's number 4 defensive tackle?
Harmon from Oregon State. Kind of a one-year wonder with his transfer to Oregon, but really disruptive. He doesn't change directions well. I mean, he's kind of a linear, a little bit top-heavy guy, but there's a lot to work with there. I mean, he uses his hands well. He's got length,
He's in that mold of Walter Nolan where height, weight, speed, you like it. There's burst there. His highlight tape is good. I think his low light tape is worse than Nolan's.
Yeah.
And he does get a little high. He's kind of got skinny ankles in a way. Mm-hmm. And if he doesn't win, he kind of gets washed out too often. It's too much high-low for me with Derek Harmon. And there is a lot to like. He's kind of on that fringe round 1, round 2 for me. I would definitely take him after the other 3 guys we mentioned.
I don't know. I kind of feel like he's a lifetime high-level rotation player,
He could hit big, though. He could hit really big.
He could. Like, that's the Eagles taking him at 32, and in 2 years from now, he's Milton Williams.
Same role as Milton Williams, essentially.
Right.
Looking right in there, and you're golden. So, high variance player, boomer bust type of guy for me with Derek Harmon. DT5.
I went with Alexander from Toledo. He's just a bully. I mean, he's got long arms. He's very powerful. He abused. I'd like even more production at Toledo, but I think he kind of, I don't say put it neutral, but there's times when he kind of knew that he's the best player out there. He was really good at the Senior Bowl, really strong combine. Good player. I mean, a little older.
Honorable mention, who's the closest guy that didn't get into your top 5 defensive tackle?
I would say probably Tyleek Williams, but he doesn't offer much as a pass rusher at all. The nose from Ohio State, but he's old school. Casey Hampton eats up double teams all day long. Alfred Collins.
Yeah, he's one of those.
Yeah.
And both of those guys are really good run defenders, but Tyleek Williams is that prototypical. It's like, okay, we need to fix our run defense. Draft Tyleek Williams.
Plug him in. Right.
That's what don't expect a lot of pass rush. And so one-dimensional, but it's an easy evaluation. You know exactly what Tyleek Williams is going to be. So he's a fun one. Can I throw in a couple of names of interior pass rushers? Might not be every down guys, but man, TJ Sanders out of South Carolina is really fun to watch. And Omar Norman-Lott, I don't know where to draft him because I don't think you can even put him on the field on rundowns, but he gets after it as an interior pass rusher. So he's kind of just like a rotational designated. Usually the designated pass rushers are more defensive ends. He's like a designated interior pass rusher.
I can see your Niners liking both those players. I'm sure that's why you brought him up. Like upfield, get off the ball dudes, right. Penetrators.
And it's one of the reasons why maybe if you're in the top 10, you go with a different position and you don't go Mason Graham. You don't go Kenneth Grant. You don't go Walter Nolan, and you wait just because there's so many good rushers and defensive interior guys throughout the draft. Joshua Farmer, Ty Robinson lit up the combine out of Nebraska. I think he's like that classic 5 technique, kind of big defensive end / defensive tackle type of player. I mean, Shamar Turner, and you got Deion Walker, which I didn't like as much. I thought I expected more.
He plays way too high.
Yeah.
He has one good rep out
of Ole Miss. The entire Ole Miss defensive line is getting drafted, which is insane.
Yeah. I'm a big CJ West fan from Indiana. He's more of a nose. Yeah, he is a really good player.
Can penetrate too, which I like. More penetration than someone like Tyleek Williams. In fact, I think CJ West is getting slept on. You get him in the 3rd round. I think you got a starting defensive tackle all day long. And another guy that's getting slept on is Jamari Caldwell.
That's my next name.
If you can't draft Kenneth Grant early, you want 330 pounds with athleticism. You got Jamari. He might go in the 4th round. And we're talking about a guy that I think is going to be a starting tackle in the NFL.
100%. I mean, he's soft in the middle and he's kind of round, but we didn't used to care about that stuff so much. But he is a bowling ball of butcher's knives. And man, the list goes on and on. JJ Pegas is really interesting at Mississippi. He gets like goal line carries and things like that. I'm kind of brushed over Alfred Collins, but there's a lot of ability. I see a lot of 90% of Kenneth Grant than Alfred Collins, but doesn't have the pass rush yet. There's a lot of these dudes.
I think Alfred Collins, you might draft him over Tyleek because he can give you space eating in the middle.
Yeah,
I think we have more there potentially as a pass rusher. That's the problem with Tyreek. I wonder where I think he might. Everyone's got him like in that early second round range. He's so one dimensional. Does he fall? So
he's not on the field in third and long ever.
Right.
Collins might be someday.
There we go. Defensive tackles. Who's your favorite? What's your favorite flavor of defensive lineman in this draft? Because there's so many of them. Let us know at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Of course, we appreciate you making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft. I'm doing Locked On 49ers. Your team is covered here on the network, no matter the sport. Find Matt doing Locked On Dynasty, Locked On NFL at various times throughout the week. And we got you covered. Matt and I back tomorrow right here. Peacock and Williamson.